Thank you for joining us on another enlightening episode on the Enlightened Misfits podcast. If you resonate with this conversation and found it insightful, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave us a review. Your feedback fuels our mission. Remember, your journey to unwavering certainty and purpose is ongoing. Stay connected with us on social media and let's continue this conversation. Let's manifest greatness in our lives. Until next time, this is Lauren from the Enlightened Misfits podcast. Stay enlightened, stay inspired, and keep manifesting your extraordinary path. Welcome back to the Enlightened Misfits podcast. I'm your host, Lauren, and in today's episode, I have an amazing guest. Her name is Michelle. She is a trauma-informed transformational coach, consultant, and trainer. Welcome, Michelle. I'm so happy for you to be here today and super excited for this conversation.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm excited as well.
So the first question that I'm excited to ask about is what led you to kind of focus on shame as a catalyst for your transformational work with you and obviously your clients?
Yeah. So I found out I was in a coaching program and I went to one of their big enrollment events. And we were just like sitting around kind of asking questions, trying to figure out like what do we do? Like what is it that we actually do? And this coach said, "Oh, you work with shame." And I was like, "What? No, I don't. Like, what are you talking about?" He's like, "No, you totally work with shame. Like based on everything that you're talking about, shame is kind of the catalyst or the thing that you really work with." And I sat there for a second and it just was like one of those staring you in the face, obvious things that you just can't see, that you keep like kind of looking around. And it really made me sit back and think like, okay, this was long after I became a therapist, long after I started working with trauma. And I really sat and thought about where did this come from? Like why is it that it's so obvious that shame is the thing that I work with, right? Because we teach what we seek to master. And so I'm like, all right, what is going on here? Where is this shame in my body? What is happening? Like, where did this all come from? Right. And even though, of course, I've done a lot of work on myself and I knew what was, what the origin point was, it's like it sunk in on a different level. And so I started going back and doing some of my own deep work. And then it just became that much clearer that shame is always in the room and it's always what I'm working with. And my personal story is that I experienced sexual abuse when I was 5 years old. And that story that got locked in my nervous system, I had done therapy, I had done all of the work, I had talked to my child self, all of these things, but there was something that was just still really locked into my nervous system around this like shame response, this I'm going to get in trouble response, this I don't want you to really see me because if you really see me, you're going to see my shame, just all of this stuff. So I became slightly obsessed with shame and doing research on shame. And one of my mentors and teachers wrote a book on shame. She and her husband have been doing workshops for years on this subject. I read it and was like, oh my God, like everything I've ever thought about shame or written about shame is right there in this book. And so, yeah, I have my own journey with it. I'm continually loving on my shame and learning to communicate with it and reminding it that things are so different now than they were then. And it is really the most powerful work that I see in my office is when someone is finally able to turn toward their shame rather than trying to hide it or stuff it or explode it out at people and just like embrace it and be with it and really honor where that came from, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. And when I'm listening to you talk, it actually makes sense. Like now that I, have gone through my own personal transformation too, I agree with you. Like I also was sexually abused too at the age of 5. And I feel like
Oh, wow.
I remember that. And now that you're saying this, shame, I didn't realize until I started getting into human design and just through my own healing, like my own healing, because I did talk therapy, I did therapy, all this stuff, like the things that, like, my parents weren't even aware of it, because I just published a book, not around specifically what I'm talking about here on the podcast, but just in general of me having trauma. I made it as just trauma, very vague, and I've talked about it more, but now that you're saying this, it's always been shame. It's always been, every situation has either been rejection, but understanding my genetic trauma of rejection, I was born with that, the primary emotion is shame. So it's like, here's shame again. It's like the big old word. It's like right in my face, so I definitely can resonate with that. And I know a lot of people that are listening here also deal with shame. And it's actually very interesting too, because my partner now, his genetic trauma is genetic trauma of shame. And I feel like, because I've learned so much about my own shame, I'm able to teach him about his own shame. And, like, it's very transformative. And I love like you said, I love watching people, not that I love watching them go through how, like, the darker parts of the shame, but it's like when they have that, oh my goodness, that's not me anymore. I'm, a 35, whoever, like, version of myself. I don't have to pretend like I'm 5,
Right.
or when it happens of like conflict, I feel like in certain situations, I feel like I know me, I'll act like I'm 5 again, like
Yes.
in conflict, right? And it's like, now that I have that awareness, it's that like deep fear, or like the resistance that I feel like will come from that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's literally like a child part hops into the driver's seat and is now driving the car. And it's not that we're not there, but we are in the back seat now. And this part of us has kind of taken over. And in internal family systems work, we're always looking at, like, how do we bring compassion
Yeah.
and love and curiosity to these parts. And sometimes we have to set boundaries with these parts, just like you would a
Yeah.
child. Like, you're not going to let a 5-year-old drive the bus. So it's like, sweetheart, I know that you're here. I get it. I get why this feels so big, but you need to be in the back seat. I'm the adult. I'm going to be driving the bus.
Yeah.
I love you, but it's really like the issue is that because shame is a freeze state, number one, it
Right.
keeps us frozen. And so there's like rigidity, and there's no movement, and there's a lot of fear. We want to be able to help soften that, but we don't soften it by hating on our shame. Like, we
Right.
can't shift it with our judgment and our expectations. We have to shift it with our love and our curiosity. And that's really hard, because the parts of us that we feel shame about, we're embarrassed about, or we don't like, or we even hate. And so it's like a lot of the work is getting to the place where I can have a semblance of compassion for a part of myself that I feel so shameful about, right?
Yes.
It's just, yeah, it can be really hard to get there.
Yes. Yeah. I was going to say, now you speaking about a 5-year-old too, like driving the bus, I actually have a real life, you know, 4.5-year-old that acts that way. And she's actually been my biggest teacher through this last 4.5 years, because
Mhm.
her also, of course, I did her human design chart, and her genetic trauma is shame. So I know for a fact that I'm very conscious. I'm raising her to be conscious, so even though she wants to do something, I'm not going to put generational trauma back onto her, because I've healed that, right? So it's like, I have now the awareness that I'm not going to be kind of like that drip, like of me not wanting to heal, or not being aware to heal from like my parents or their parents and all that, ancestral stuff, that I can teach her about her shame. So it's
Yeah.
going to come up, right? Like it comes up all the time, the way that she talks. And I try to like help her understand that, at her awareness level, obviously she's only 4.5, like 4.5, but I feel like she's very, like she understands, like she just maybe can't put words to it, but understands. And it's just my way of, raising her like the kid that I always wanted to be. why I'm
Yeah.
healing my own inner child at the same time, so I'm gonna fail a lot, but it's like, at least I have the awareness that, I'm not gonna, just because I went through what I went through doesn't mean that she has to go through what she, like,
Well, and something that you're bringing up around, around kids, there's such a valuable distinction between guilt and shame,
yeah,
that like guilt, like, yeah, you want to feel bad about doing something that hurts somebody else. Like, of
right,
course you do, right? Like
yeah,
guilt is, I feel bad that I did that,
right,
right? Shame is, I am bad because I did that. And
right,
so guilt is a normal kind of healthy emotion, and shame will attach itself to every emotion. Like it's like a sticky virus that like locks on to any other feeling state that we have that's distressing. And just catching ourselves, like, I am this, anytime we use I am language, to be really aware of what you're saying about
yeah,
yourself, right? And
yeah,
and that it's okay to feel badly that you did something that impacted somebody in a negative way or had a consequence or whatever. Like that's a normal process. The shame
yeah.
is where it's sticky and icky and like convoluted and
Yeah.
yeah.
I was gonna say, yeah, I would say I like the way that you had said that too, because I feel like that too. I would always say I am angry. And it's just like, no, I just feel like I even
Right.
now I have to, when I type stuff out or I'm writing, I catch myself writing like I'm angry. And it's like,
Right.
no, I'm not angry. I feel angry. It's
Right.
like catching myself like I'm
Yeah.
not anger. I'm not I'm not all of these things. I am just feeling this, but it's like
Yeah.
that shift. And even, and I always tell, some of my clients too, like they're like, how you make things look so easy. And I'm like, trust me, I'm very transparent about a lot of things. Not that I can't be transparent about everything, but it's like I just kind of, weed out the things that not everybody wants to hear, all negative, and not everybody wants to hear positive. It's like I want to find that harmony and stuff, but trust me, I'm like, this is not easy. This is very hard. Like it's very hard. I have to make a conscious decision like every day, and I'm sure you do too, to like continue to heal. Like it's not just like, oh, I'll feel better. I hear people say all the time, I'll feel better when this happens.
Right.
And it's like,
Right.
but that's never going to happen, right?
Right.
Like you're going to miss those moments. And I'm that person, not that I'm going to like kind of relate astrology to this, but I'm an Aquarius, and I always feel like my whole life that I would chase after the good and then
Yeah.
attach myself to it, just like shame attaches itself to things. And then I would miss all of those moments in between of when I should have just been in the moment,
Yeah.
of because that next bad thing is going to happen. It's going to happen.
Yeah.
It's just the way that things go. So,
I have a teacher who gave me a really great metaphor, and she painted a picture of like you go out and there's this beautiful kind of cliff and it's sunset and it's a nice warm day. You get out of your car and you go sit on the edge of this little cliff and you're just admiring the sunset and breathing in the air and the smells and all of the beautiful things, and you just like lean into this experience, right? And you absorb it all. She said, but imagine that you're getting out of the car and you can barely see the sun through the clouds. It's raining, it's cold. Would you lean in just as hard to that experience? And it took me a moment. And I was like, hell no, I'm not going to lean into that experience. It's uncomfortable, right? But
yeah,
her whole point was like when we learn to lean in to every experience because we're meant to feel it all, then we
yeah,
stop doing that to ourselves. We stop saying this is a good experience and this is a bad experience. We simply say this was an experience. And yes, I felt cold. And yes, I felt maybe even disappointment that I couldn't see the sun, but I let myself have that experience and I let myself have those feelings, right? I think that's one of the other things that shows up so much in my office is, the same thing we do with shame when we try to stuff it away or push it down, we do with our own feeling state. And we think, especially if we've got a trauma history, that this feeling is going to last forever, or this feeling is going to take over and I'm going to lose myself, or I'm going to go crazy, or whatever it is. And the reality is we can only sustain a strong emotion at max for like 20 minutes.
Right.
And what usually sucks us back in is this, right? Is
Right.
thinking about it. And then we put
Right.
ourselves right back in the position that we were in, and whoosh, it comes rushing back. But when we get good at, just like even putting hands on the body of like, all right, I'm having a feeling, right? Like it's a big one. I'm just
Yeah.
going to ride this wave. And sometimes those waves come crashing in, and sometimes those waves come rolling in gently. But if I can just be with it, become a good surfer, then feelings don't feel quite so scary, at least the distressing and discomforting ones, right? Like getting comfortable being uncomfortable is how we continue to expand as a human. And as practitioners or providers or healers or whatever it is we call ourselves, the more we do that, the more we can hold for others. Like we can
Right.
only take people as far as we've gone ourselves. So if we don't know how to be with our own emotional state, then why on earth do we think we can hold space for somebody else's?
Right.
And really let them go where they need to go to do the natural healing that they already know how to do.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
I 100% agree with everything. And I love that. I'm going to have to remind myself of that. I need to start being a better surfer.
Me too. I'm
Because
always
I do,
learning.
I probably am going to laugh at myself because I do really good at, I'm like, I don't say the words like, here we go again. I'm like, oh, this feels like, I
Yeah.
usually say like, I feel, and you're right, because I don't know if you know much about human design, but my authority, the way that I make decisions is emotional. And I know when I teach this, I know 90 seconds, and I always let the emotion run through my body for 90 seconds, but I stop it because it's like, if not, like you said, I'm going down a rabbit hole, like if at that point. So if I need time, like space or time, if it's dealing with somebody else, like then I ask for that. I need space, I need time to think about this or whatever. Or if it's just myself, I give myself time and space. Before, I would just have that high expectation of like, I need to just do this right now. Like, why like I would shame myself, like, why don't I have this all figured out? And it's
Yeah.
just like, nobody has anything figured out. Even to this day, when somebody tells me they have it figured out, I'm like, you're lying to yourself because you're not,
Right.
I don't even have it figured out. And you
Yep.
know, I have a lot of
Yep.
wisdom, I feel like.
Yep.
But it's like
Absolutely.
none of us have it figured out. Even if we have it figured out, the universe, whoever you believe in, is going to show you don't.
I remember I used to have a Chinese proverb on the bottom of my email, and it said, "A wise man knows that he knows nothing at all." And
Yes.
I continue to keep that. And it's interesting because, I remember someone kept saying, you've got to put yourself out there as an expert. Like, Michelle, you've been doing this for a really long time. You know your shit. You can talk this stuff up, down, sideways, backwards.
Yeah.
And it was interesting because I felt this battle inside of myself of like, but I'm never technically going to be an expert because I'm always going to be learning.
Right.
But what they were helping me reframe is like, of course you're always going to be learning. That's why you are an expert at what you do.
Yeah.
Like, you have never stopped, and you've been doing this a long time. And it was interesting to have to really let that in and really hold that expertise. Like, yeah, that's what I do, and I'm going to continue learning. And maybe I'm not, whoever the expert is these days, right?
Right.
But I am
Yeah.
my own expert, and I'm not going to diminish the knowledge that I hold. And so I had to work with the shame, right? I had to work with
Yeah.
the what are people going to think if I call myself an expert? What if somebody asks me a question and I don't know the answer? What if,
Yeah.
someone knows more than I do and they come into one of my containers? Like, what do I do? Right? And
Yeah.
I just kept coming back to, then you're honest. You
Right.
say, wow, that's a great question. I don't know the answer to that one. I'm definitely going to do some research on that. Or, I'm
Yeah.
so glad to have another expert in this container. Thank you so much for offering your wisdom and helping this container be that much stronger because of what you bring in. Right. But if my shame
Yeah.
was talking, I would start doubting myself. I'd pull myself in, my body would get smaller. Right.
Yeah.
And it's just like, I think one of my best practices is when I feel that feeling, because I know what my shame feels like, I take a breath, I put my hand on my body.
Yeah.
And then from there, I'm actually asking my body's wisdom to be what comes out of my mouth, not this, my head, because my head has got the story. My body has got the truth.
Right. I love that. Yeah. I actually did that. I learned that a couple years ago from one of my mentors because I would always feel like I had to react. And that was obviously coming from my mind. And sometimes she's like, sometimes your body might not even give a response. And that's okay. You have to accept that. That's just coming with like acceptance. And I'm like, I'm working on that too. Like, I feel like, for like you said, I feel like I'm always learning. And I've had kind of the same thoughts when I was, like before we started recording, talking about like rebranding and changing my niche to be more about who I am serving now versus who I was serving last year. And it's like every year, I feel like when people ask me who I am, I'm like, I don't know, it's like ever changing. Who am I? Like, so it's like and it was really hard for me to step in to call myself a healer, even though I know that's what I am, and even to say that out loud, it was like I have so much of unhealed parts inside of me. And, my own mentor was like, that does not matter. That just
Right.
makes you real, a real human with emotions that you're here. So I was like, okay, all right. And I know that now, like, I don't own my emotions. I just needed to understand them. It helped with separating like my mind versus my body versus the emotions that I feel. Like it's
Yeah.
all separate entities, and it's so much easier now. I mean, obviously my body remembers, right? But it's
Right.
like my mind is the one that's telling me all these stories that I'm like, hey, stop it, we're not doing that today.
Well, you brought up something that I think is really important when it comes to the concept of healing, right? Which is number one, it's never done.
Right.
And number two, there is no destination here. And
Right.
so I see healing is like a flower that just keeps blooming, right?
Right.
Because I have people who come into my office who have done a fuck ton of healing. They
Yeah.
have done a lot of healing. They've been in a lot of therapy. They've been on retreats. They've done medicine. They've done all of the things.
Right.
And when we start working, sometimes there's this like, oh my God, why is that coming up? Like, I thought I healed that. I thought
Yeah.
I was done with that one. And it's like,
Yeah.
no, your brain and body is just lining up that information in a new way, right? Like, of course it's coming up. It's connected. We don't have to go all the way back into it. It's
Right.
just coming back up because it's relevant to what you're working on now. There's some thread there that's connected to it, right? And I've experienced that in my own healing where I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, I have to go back and talk to my 11-year-old again? Like, well, I thought we were done with these conversations. Like,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know? And it's like,
Literally.
no, there
Yeah.
was this little piece that just maybe it's the final piece, maybe it's not, it doesn't really matter. I think people often, I know because I work with a lot of complex trauma, like there's this feeling of like this is like I can't possibly heal. Like there's too many parts, too many traumas, too many reinforcing experiences. There's no way I'm ever going to heal. And the reframe is like, again, healing is an unfolding. That's
Right.
all it is. It's an unfolding. And then sometimes we do those deep dives and we go in and we really like rip it open and get in there and, do some psychic
Yeah.
surgery and all of the things. And other times it's just the healing is like being in the supermarket and going, oh, wow, I just did that thing, didn't I? It's been a long time since I did that thing. All right, what's going on? Right? We just start
Yeah.
talking to ourselves and noticing like, oh, yeah, okay, that got kind of activated again, but it's all good. It's all good. I got it. It's all right.
Yeah.
That's healing too. It's not
Yeah.
always like catharsis is a big myth. It doesn't always look like catharsis. Sometimes it's those tiny steps and then realizing after the fact that you're no longer doing a particular behavior or you're no longer talking to yourself in a particular way or whatever.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. I was gonna say, I know that you're talking to many people and the audience that's listening, but sometimes like you're talking, I feel like you're talking to me so deeply right now. Not that I'm like being selfish or anything, but I feel like I'm like, wow, like she really does see me. Like it's like she doesn't even know my story, but
Mhm.
understands me because I've actually did my first retreat, hosted my first retreat. I've been to tons of retreats, but hosted my first retreat and well, I've had tons of transformations, but it was a transformation that was holding me back for these last
Mm.
probably year because I went through the shamanic journey, and again, that came up, that dark, that I know I needed a lot of deep healing. And it was a lot of that, my inner child, like you said, I come back to my child, I'm like, are you done yet? Like,
Right?
like that's how it was. But I didn't speak to her that way at this retreat. It was more of, I had to thank her for being there, but we
Yeah.
have to go here. Like, and the
Yeah.
same thing with my, like teenager self, when I experience a lot of anger or resentment or bitterness, it's like, I know that's not normally my inner child for me anyway. For my experience, mine's more sadness and shame, my inner child, but my inner teenager. And I always tell people they're different
Yes.
people. And you have to understand who's speaking, because if not, it's going to be like you're going to feel like, oh, I'm not even, most of the time, because of my rejection, I relate it to my genetic trauma rejection. I will reject myself,
Right.
like I will reject, and then to a point that I can't avoid it anymore, because I can be a little bit anxious, like attachment style, but most of the time when I'm doing my own healing, it's more of like that, avoidant, like, oh no, like walking down a hallway, like, nope, I don't see
Yep.
you. We're not doing that today,
Yep.
but it's like, and then again, it keeps going. I keep putting it on myself to the point that it's starting to affect my like actual reality. And it's just like, oh, okay, like obviously I don't do that anymore. But at that time, for that transformation, I wasn't ready to speak about it. I think I speak about it a couple weeks ago on one of the podcast episodes. But people were asking me about the retreat, and I just wanted to be in that space of being, because I'd never felt that way before, and I wasn't ready to speak about it. And I think a lot of it, like you said, I've been doing this, you know, like like having my own business for the last 4 years, but my own like deep healing for like the last 8. And I just felt very unauthentic, I guess, if I were to speak about it. And it was, one of my mentors has said to me, Lauren, no, she actually went to the shamanic journey with me. So I had her there to support me, along with, who facilitated it. But she said, Lauren, that's a deeper level of how to love yourself. And I
Right.
was like, oh my goodness. Like, so for the longest time, the last couple years, I was like gaslighting myself into, and that's pretty much the best word I could say, that I was
Mm.
gaslighting myself into like, I can love myself, self-love, all this stuff. But I was really like lying to myself
Yeah.
constantly. And it was like, that's when that shame came up. And it was like, my inner child was like, hey, hello, you're not doing this the right way, but
Yeah.
it was like me to kind of project that to other people. Like I felt like, wow, am I a fraud? And it's like, no, Lauren, you're not a fraud. It's just you had to have that. And it's like, obviously, I don't know why I'm going on a rampage about this, but obviously, and somebody else needed to hear this too, because I feel like I always speak what people like. I do this in sessions too. I'll just go on like this story about something, and I'm like, why am I even speaking about this? And then it clicks for like somebody listening, that they're like, I needed to hear whatever you said. I was like, okay, good, because I don't know why I was speaking about it. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. That was another place that shame showed up for me, was like I didn't understand what was happening when words would come out of my mouth that
Yeah.
weren't mine,
Yeah.
right? That were like this beautiful kind of download.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I would at first had this like reaction, like, oh my God, am I full of shit that this just came out of my mouth? Right. And it
Yeah.
wasn't like I was saying it was me or it was my experience, but I would just have like you said, like this story that would come out, or like this phrase that would come out, or this question that would come out. And that was some interesting healing, to go back to kind of healing not only myself, but kind of this lineage piece around being seers and being, people who were, like burned at the stake and,
Yeah.
all of the things, like to really reclaim that awareness and that deeper knowledge and being kind of a
Yeah.
conduit for something that is greater than ourselves. And it was, yeah, definitely an interesting journey to kind of claim that
Yeah.
and accept that that's what was happening, that this isn't me, and that's okay. And
Right.
I'm still here, and I'm still in control of what I do and what I don't do.
Right.
But to really trust and start to allow more and more of that to kind of come through me, it was a really beautiful learning.
Yeah. I was going to say, when people ask me about like, oh, how's the shamanic journey? I'm like, well, it's a journey and it's very interesting. But now, from the last 11 weeks, 12 weeks, everything just makes sense. It's like, that's what I like. It's like I made myself stay in the moment each week that I was going through different things. And, before, I can see how I would avoid it. How I would take it on like it's my current reality right now,
Yeah.
instead of just using it as wisdom, keeping it there, and then moving on. Because that's the only reason why I believe that, you just need to understand it. Like, you need to understand, why do I feel this way? Why am I here? Why is this happening? I mean, for
Mhm.
me, I was always like, why? Why is this happening? I need to understand it. So, and I feel like once you understand it, that could help you further, like that just kind of helps
And
you.
the other piece that you're bringing up is like, I love internal family systems and the frame
Yeah.
because of this idea that like you are in relationship with all parts of you. And
Right.
so when, do you want a healthy relationship or do you want an unhealthy relationship? How
Right.
do you want to be communicating with these parts of you? And sometimes it's like I have to be the good mom and I have to set a boundary and say, I'm sorry. I know that you're really upset, but I don't have time and I don't have capacity to be with you. So I love you. Be safe, go do your thing. And then I will come back, but I need to come back when I've got the time, space, and capacity to be with you. And like you were just saying, like, okay, I see you and I need to now
Yeah.
go over here. You can come with me if you want, like you can come with me and go do this cool thing or whatever,
Yeah.
but you're not going to take over this experience that I'm having right now. And
Right.
it's such a powerful tool. One of my favorite phrases is I cannot help you if you overwhelm me.
Oh, that's actually really good. Yeah.
Right? And
I'll
just to
have
be able
to,
to tell our parts, like, I want to help you, but I can't when you're overwhelming me. So I need to separate from you. And then maybe we can have a conversation.
yeah, I love that. A lot of it too is like I said about my daughter, when she gets overwhelmed and overstimulated, that triggers me to feel very overwhelmed and overstimulated. So I always try to talk to myself like I would talk to my daughter. And it helps me because I understand the psychological reasoning behind all of this, but I'm like, why do we talk to ourselves? Like, I used to always ask myself, why do I talk to myself like shit? But I would never treat somebody else like that. Like, I just
Right.
never would. Even I said this the other week to a friend. I said, here's the thing about me. Cause she was like, gosh, that was so disrespectful that they had said or whatever. And I was like, it's okay. It's not about me. It's about them. And it's like, I'm good at making it like it's not about me, it's about
Right.
them, kind of thing, and not taking on that personal. And she's like, oh, I need to actually try that. And I was like, well, it might be a good thing, because
Yeah.
could you imagine walking around with everybody's like pain and hurt and all this? I mean, I did that for, I did that too. Like, I've learned that I can't do that, right? It's not my fault that they're hurting and I can't help them. It's like I
Exactly.
have to,
The
so
same exact idea, right? I
yes,
can't help
exactly.
you if
Yes.
you overwhelm me. So I need to separate myself from you and I need to be that compassionate observer, but I don't need to be bonded with you and blended with you. Like
Yes.
that's not going to serve either of us.
Right.
And I know that sometimes people's wounded parts really think that they need that, right? They
Right.
think that they need someone to join them or blend with them in order to feel truly validated and understood. And that's a hard one, to
Yeah.
be able to
Yeah.
help them understand that that's actually not loving and compassionate to
Right.
blend and join somebody else in their emotional experience.
Yeah, I was going to say, I love that you actually just said that, because that's actually has been a huge part of my own journey is relationships. So
Mhm.
it's like how to be in a healthy relationship. And I remember just talking to a client last week, and she said, because she's looking at my relationship now. I'm in a healthy relationship. Obviously, I worked towards that. It's not, I was
Okay.
always, I always say that my relationship drug of choice was relationships and codependent ones, so it's like, I was always, even though I was depending, like I was the one that, provided, very masculine, but, I would also control from that same space
Right.
because I was so out of control. And I
Yep.
said to her, I want to tell you from my perspective that a healthy relationship is not, it's actually easier for me to be in a unhealthy relationship because I'm so used to it than a healthy relationship. And we're on Zoom and I'm like, and she's looking at me and I was like, you think I'm lying, don't you? She was like, I just don't believe you. And I was like, well, try it, like try it because you're not going to believe me until, so she's like working towards that. And she's like, every once in a while, she'll kind of like, I'll check in with her, and I can see that she's like, oh, like it's actually easier. I'm like, why would healing be easy? Everybody would be doing it.
Right.
I was like, it's hard. And
I joke that every person who walks through my door is a fucking badass.
yeah,
Every single,
yeah,
because you're choosing to do it. You're choosing, knowing that there's darkness, knowing that there's pain, knowing that there's suffering inside, and you're
yeah.
showing it anyway. Like it's amazing.
Yeah. And that's what I tell, because and then like, but then I joke too, like I'll be like, well, we both decided this, so we're both here for a reason, because I've also near death experiences too, that I hated myself so bad that I was like, I just don't want to be here on this dimension anymore. Like, I just don't want to be here. And it was like, I understand that perspective too, because I was there, so it was like, I get it. And I was like, I promise you, if you just take it one day at a time, like I always say, like one day, I take it one day at a time. If I start thinking about what I'm going to do next week, oh, my anxiety kicks in. Like, it's like, oh, I have to control this. This has to go this, like, it's just like, it's still there. Everything is still there. It's just, it's my trauma is not controlling me anymore. And I'm in control of it.
Yeah.
It doesn't go away. It's not like it can wash it away. It's still there.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and the other piece that you're bringing in that I work with a lot is the body, right? Like I do deep body temples with a group, and it's a closed eyes movement meditation.
Okay.
And anytime that you work with the body, all of the shit is gonna come up. Your body image stuff, like how many times in deep body journeys have I apologized to my own body for not listening, for pushing, for, causing harm, for all of the things, right? Because it's like we have this vessel that we're going to be with for the rest of our lives, and will carry us for the rest of our lives, and yet we don't often have a relationship with it, and a healthy relationship with it. And it's the same thing. It's like our body is just in some ways another part, and our relationship to our body is like having another relationship. And so the deep body journeys that I do, it blows my mind every single time what comes out of just closing your eyes and letting your body move you, and noticing where you hold the stories, and playing with how you want to be with those stories, and taking those stories and putting them out here and dancing with them a little bit and reorienting to them, right? Like it's
Yeah.
just amazing work. And I love the fact that it's group because it's community, right? Like
Right.
90% of our injury and our wounding is relational. And so the
Right.
only way we're really going to be able to heal it is through relationship. And sometimes the
Right.
one-on-one is amazing and beautiful, but the reality is we've got to then go out into the world. And so how do we
Right.
start orienting to community and starting to share in community and opening ourselves?
Yeah. I was going to say, I love that you say that too, because it goes back to like a healthy relationship with yourself. That was, I got to the place that I had a healthy relationship with myself. And then I got into another relationship and it was like, oh shit, this shit's coming
Right.
back up. And
Yes.
then I realized, oh, it's okay. Like I know how to deal with it. Like I'm just going to do the same thing I did with myself, because I truly believe if I look at the world from the inside out. So it's like what am I judging about myself that I'm judging about the other person, or if it's, like my partner or whatever, I feel like that's been so helpful for me, because if I'm being a little bit too judgy about myself, or like, like you said, body image, I've always had body image, challenges, not, I shouldn't say issues, just challenges. It's something that comes and goes. So it's like, that it all comes back to, like myself. And I love that you said that, because I do want to say too, you have for the listeners, you have a free, is it the movement meditation?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll make sure that also is in the description box for the listeners, so that I know I'm going to listen to it today. So, or this week, I should say. So I'll make sure that they have that as well.
Awesome.
So, as we wrap up, because I could talk about all this forever.
Me too.
So what advice could you leave the listeners today, that you would give somebody who is maybe struggling to step into maybe this deep intimacy with themselves, or maybe this maybe some of their trauma that's coming back up? What advice would you give them?
You said something earlier. I think it's just such a valuable reminder over and over again of that question. Would I treat anybody else the way that I'm treating myself right now? Would I talk to anybody else the way that I'm talking? Would I assume things about other people the way that I'm assuming things about myself? And so I healing, like in the work that I do, there's so much laughter and lightness, and like healing is not all dark and dirty and like heavy. Healing can be breaking out in hysterical laughter when you catch yourself doing something. I know when I talk to my part, sometimes I'm like, whoa, we don't do that shit anymore. Remember? Like, no, we don't, we're not going to go there. We're just not going to go there. Right. Like using humor, using lightness. Shame is a free state. Anything that we can do to get out of a free state is going to be valuable, whether that is taking a deep breath, laughing, moving your body, dancing your shame, shaking it out, right? Like there's so many somatic practices, nervous system regulation practices that relate to shaking, right? Like just letting your body shake, being intentional in your shaking. I'm shaking this off. I'm shaking this through. I'm moving this energy, whatever it might be. So lightness, movement, humor, and catching yourself being mean, and reminding yourself that you would never treat anybody else this way. And so how can you come back to compassion with yourself?
I love that. Thank you so much for joining us on today's episode with Michelle on the Enlightened Misfits podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe. You can leave a review, and then share this episode with anybody that you feel that will gain knowledge from listening. Stay tuned for more captivating conversations in the future. I hope you have an amazing rest of your week, and I will see you next time.
Thank you for joining us on another enlightening episode on the Enlightened Misfits podcast. If you are a current or inspiring to be fempreneur, suffering from the fear of being seen and or feel very triggered when you're building your business, reach out to me at The Mermaid Light about my Rich and Resilient Biz Baddies. This is a collective text message Voxer support group designed to help you heal your triggers and turn imposter syndrome into bad bitch energy. If you resonate with our conversations and insight, don't forget to subscribe, rate the show, and leave a review. Your feedback fuels our mission. Remember, your journey to unwavering certainty and purpose is ongoing. So please make sure you stay connected with us on social media. Keep manifesting greatness in your life. Until next time, this is Lauren from the Enlightened Misfits podcast. Stay enlightened, stay inspired, and keep manifesting your extraordinary path.